Okay, everyone, it's 2 p.m. Eastern time, so we are going to get started. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a good-sized crowd on the line. And we've now muted ourselves, which is the first goal of the webinar. And so thanks again for joining us. I'm Sean Penny, Product Marketing Manager here at Atlassian, the Opsgenie product. I'm joined by Kevin Davis. Kevin, how are you?
Good, Sean. How are you?
Good. And we're going to be hearing from Colin on the team as well in a little bit. So we're going to jump right in here. So if you've been to a webinar before, we know we like to keep it as interactive as possible. So if you do want to ask a question, please do for your own, your own setup with Atlassian and/or Opsgenie. You can type your questions directly into the GoToWebinar interface, and we'll answer those. We'll probably save them and answer them at the end of the demo because we do have a lot to get through, and then we can save some time for questions at the end. So today the agenda is pretty short. So we're going to dive into, for anyone who's new, we're going to new on the Opsgenie side anyway. We're going to dive into kind of a brief overview of what is Opsgenie and the problem that we set out to solve when we founded the company. And then we're going to get right into the product demo, and we're going to spend 90% of our time there, and then we'll have time at the end as well for a Q&A. So jumping right in. So the problem we're trying to solve is if you look at the typical IT environment that's out there, and particularly 5-7 years ago as Opsgenie was coming around, IT and dev stacks were becoming more and more complex. Businesses were moving to the cloud. They had a lot of hybrid solutions out there. But the goal is, working with SaaS products is to deliver great products to your customers 24/7. And to do that, you have to make sure that you've got monitoring in place. So companies adopt monitoring tools, the Datadogs of the world and others. And these tools are great, and Opsgenie actually integrates with many of them. The only problem that you'll start to see is if you just plug in a bunch of monitoring tools to your stack, is you end up with lots of email and lots of communication coming out kind of in a one-way fashion to your operations team. So they're kind of bombarded on the front lines. Alert fatigue starts to happen, and the tools that promise to alert you now are just kind of creating a lot of noise, and it's hard to tell, kind of the needle in the haystack of which alerts you should really be focused upon. And that's the problem that we're out to solve. So Opsgenie fits right in the middle of those two, right in the middle between your monitoring tools and your operational team. And then on the back end, we've got great documentation and reporting. So alerts come into Opsgenie, and this is what we're going to cover in more detail here. Our flexible rules engine, on-call schedules, alerting, escalation policies, etc. You're routing alerts to the right person at the right time and making sure that anything that isn't important doesn't cloud that view. And then on the back end, we're giving documentation and reporting so everyone's kept up to date and knows exactly what's going on. It's just the bare bones basics of alert management and making sure that you've got an on-call staff that's prepared and knows which alerts they should be focused on. In addition to that, over the last couple of years, what we've seen, what most of the industry have seen, is chat tools have become the favored method of communication. Obviously, with Slack being the major player there that we're all using. Chat ops practices are heavily adopted. Ticketing tools, project management solutions are being deployed. So if you take that all into effect, there's a lot more inputs across a business and an organization and an operational side versus just your monitoring tools. And this graph is kind of a good representation of what Kevin is going to talk a lot about today. With the acquisition of Opsgenie by Atlassian, we're going to have even stronger connections with all of these tools. We already have great integrations with all of them, but now, regardless of whether your monitoring tool is sending an alert from an automated tool, or you're getting human-generated alerts coming from a customer calling in, or a system goes down and collapses on itself, and you have to put a ticket into Jira Service Desk, human-generated or automated, now all of that information can sync into one spot with Opsgenie. You can sync that to Slack. With Jira Ops as well, we're going to talk about on the back end there. Eventually, you can post to Slack, as I mentioned, and keep your teammates and your teams working in Slack and in Jira. And then also being able to post to status page and communicate outwardly to your customers and your stakeholders and shareholders about the status of an outage and things like that. And then postmortem using Confluence to recap and kind of do a postmortem using that data that you're getting from the Opsgenie back-end reporting that really drives this whole process. So that's kind of the very high level view. And now we're going to look at this in real life, in a real life demo. So I'm going to send things over to you, Kevin. Let me see if I can make you the presenter here. find you on the list here?
Actually, no, we can't. My system just went down.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you mean, the whole thing's locked?
Yeah. Let me call Colin, see if he has.
Okay, that's not a good thing.
Hello?
Hey, is something going on with the system? Because my computer just got locked out.
Yeah, I can't log in either. I think the whole thing might be down.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you put a ticket in Jira Service Desk?
Yep, I'll do that right now.
All right, thanks. So obviously the system didn't actually go down, but Sean and I are trying to win an Academy Award for our best short story and webinar series, so we thought
I
we'd act a
convinced
little
myself
bit.
that it did go down there.
So
you should have control now.
Yeah, in those types of scenarios, this is what a lot of our customers will see, or what they'll start to experience. Whether it's alerts coming in, as Sean had mentioned, directly from any of the monitoring tools, or if we're going in, we're seeing multiple alerts being created from human-generated alerts for any of the tickets being created based off of Jira Service Desk, or any of the other tools that you all have in place today. Now, as Sean had mentioned, the most powerful part of Opsgenie is not just the ability to notify and update all of your users, but when it comes time to an actual critical incident, it's not time to acknowledge and time to respond that's the most critical. It's the communications piece. So within Opsgenie, the way that you can go about designing all of that is through your integrations. As all of your different systems start to kick off and trigger alerts and events, whether it be for security or just regular applications, all of the Atlassian products are available here for Jira Service Desk, Jira Ops, as well as Jira Software, and then again, any of the additional monitoring tools. Now, the most powerful part with our integrations with Atlassian is the focus on what we call action mapping, and that's our ability to go ahead and start to automate a lot of the manual processes that are in place today. So as soon as I went and called Colin and had him go and create the issue in Jira Service Desk, that action was already created for us. But now the most important part is, again, communicating and executing this efficiently and as quickly as possible, so we're reducing downtime as quickly as possible. Here in the drop-down selection, you can automate a lot of the different actions that your users would take in any system. The most important part in these two sections here is that the action flows directly through Opsgenie. And then at that point, we can take the action to update the issue directly in Jira, update the incident in Jira Ops, or update and add additional information directly in Jira Service Desk. So we're automatically communicating directly with our customers in a more proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach. And certainly not everything does need to create issues or tickets for us. So this alert filter section will allow us to immediately identify which types of alerts should have the ability to take that action for us. And a lot of our customers will start to focus in on anything that's critical or of high value. And then as we start to add that automation in place, it's always important to understand exactly what information we want to provide to our end user. Again, as Sean mentioned, with a lot of the things we're starting to do with Confluence, as well as any of the Atlassian products that we integrate with, we can start to actually customize and rebuild what's going to be available to our user when they do get notified. And this starts to help a lot more with when the user does get notified, they're not always going to be sitting in Opsgenie or sitting in that tool just waiting for an alert to happen. They want to actually be responsive to what's going on. And by reconstructing and adding more value upon first glance, whether it comes from our push notification, goes directly into a chat tool such as Slack, or if the user is being notified through a voice notification, they'll be able to quickly identify what that issue is. Their Confluence documentation will already be available for them in the description or the notes field. So whether they've been there for 5 years or 5 weeks, they understand what the process is and how to properly go about remediating that specific issue. And then any of the other text boxes can be configured and made to provide more information for your specific goals and teams at that point. And then here in the filter section, as opposed to having to manage and rebuild a lot of the workflows in Jira or in your monitoring tools or any of the other systems, a lot of that can be managed directly here in the filter section. In any of the drop-downs that you see available, these are all the values we're ingesting from the actual alert payload. Those are the same fields that are available here in these dynamic boxes. So you'll have full flexibility to customize, define, and build the workflow that's most appropriate for you and your team. Now, as we start to build the foundation of what types of alerts we want to start to ingest, the most important workflow is where we ultimately want these alerts to go. So Opsgenie's concept of teams, very similar to projects built into any of the Atlassian products, are going to be closely mimicked to what your organizational structure is today. Here in the main tab, you can manage everything from your different on-call schedules, whether it's a true follow the sun type method that we have here, or if it's just a simple week over week on-call rotation. All of that will be available for you to customize and build as needed. And certainly, whether it's external users or just people within the business organization, if they need insight into who's available in case an issue were to arise, you can always export this calendar to any of your tools, and all of that information will be available for them. Now, as you go and start to build the different rotations, you can customize and define what it is you would like to ultimately accomplish here in the rotation type. So again, whether it's that daily, weekly focus on 9 to 5, every other day, week over week, that can all be defined here. And then for some of our customers that run a 24/7 NOC or SOC, it's important for them to have the ability to define custom rotations. So whether that be every single 8 hours a new person comes on, then we'll be able to identify that and update it in the schedule itself. Now, as we move forward, the steps that we're actually able to take, those are going to be defined here in the routing rules as well as the escalation policies. The routing rules will act as your proactive approach towards the types of scenarios that you experience on a day-to-day basis that are either cumbersome or can be put into a more efficient process, so that way the team is more able to take appropriate action as needed. In this example, if we just focus in on any priority 2 alerts over the weekend because we don't have an on-call team, then we can immediately define and capture that and then select which types of workflows we want to take, whether it be go directly to a different escalation that may or may not have a more aggressive approach, but at least somebody to reach out to and notify about this issue, or just send it directly to our on-call schedules. And then as we continue to define the different routing rules, we can see and pick and choose ultimately where those alerts go. And then for that standard kind of process that we have in place for any typical alerts, we can redefine that workflow here. And then those escalations are going to be the steps ultimately that will be enacted to ultimately notify your users or continue to notify the multiple people on call. Now, the escalations themselves, what you have the ability to do is focus in on any type of alert that's not acknowledged and then define what step you would like to take. Here, if we just notify an individual user, it'll be sent to any of their 4 contact methods that they've defined. But we can also start to incorporate different teams as we reach certain SLAs and potentially start to come out of breach of those contracts. The important part here is to understand that you're not having to step away from the issue. Opsgenie is going to proactively reach out for you and then gather those resources. And especially if we want to focus on any alerts that aren't closed in a certain time period, if you do have those SLAs built into Jira Service Desk, we can start to closely mimic those through the escalations, and then again use the drop down for a call to action as to who and whom we should start to gather to build those resources out. And certainly for any of the groups on the call that do like to build things out programmatically or leverage APIs, all of the parts that we've talked about so far, they do have available API documentation, and this little widget icon here will follow you around, so that way it's always handy if needed. And certainly, as Sean had mentioned, as you start to throw more and more monitoring at your infrastructure, it becomes kind of, a process that is, a monstrosity to maintain over time. Now, the notification policies, a lot of my customers leverage these heavily for their monitoring tools. And the reason for that, if we think of what the routing rule kind of provides us, it's more of a redirect on certain types of alerts. Now, if we want to add logic as to if somebody were to call in and submit an issue within Jira Service Desk that they forgot their password or it's been locked out, something simple, maybe they don't need to immediately be notified. Maybe, we have different SLAs. So instead of immediately notifying them, just put in a delay policy. So that way we're still within our, contractual obligations for the SLA, and we're still taking care of it in a timely manner. But we're also giving our resources the ability to focus in on those more high severity and critical alerts that are generating revenue or potentially generating revenue for the organization, and then continue to build out these types of workflows as needed. And now that we've set the foundation for our actual integrations and the types of alerts we want to come through, we've built our process for where ultimately the destination should go for that alert. We can move back into the alerts dashboard, which is going to really start to encompass all the different tools and workflows that we've talked about so far. So at the beginning of the call, when we ran through our fake incident, again, we can see we have our Jira Service Desk ticket that's been created. We have our incident that's been created here for us already. And then as Sean had mentioned, we can start to tie all of these different tools together directly into our chat tools, whether it be Slack or any of the other ones that are available for you. But when we dig into the alert, we can start to see that there's more actual information in there around who was notified, how they were notified, and then all of the different systems that were communicating at that point in time. So here we can see, again, we've gone and created our issue in Slack. We've already started the documentation for a framework for postmortem within Jira, which we can leverage for Confluence. We're updating our issue directly here, and then most importantly, whether we're taking action directly in Opsgenie itself or any of the other systems, all of that information and all of those actions will be sent directly to those systems. And as I mentioned, it's communication that's usually the most critical when incidents do occur. So as I move into Jira Ops and I have my incident that was created from Opsgenie, which is this one here, this is where we can start to tie all of these tools together without having to either recreate work that's already been done or start to redo work people are already working on at that point in time. And it's this type of functionality that our customers really are starting to see the most value in, especially from an incident management perspective. So in the event my system did go down, because the search is failing, my issue from Jira Service Desk has been created for us. We've already started the process of notifying all of the different users through all of the different methods that we already have in place from our different tools. So Jira Ops here will allow us to immediately go and create our relevant channel for Slack, so that way we can start to communicate internally to all the different teams that Opsgenie has notified. We can go and immediately update the status in status page, communicating externally to all of our customers that there's some type of issue that's currently going on, and then always have insight into the Opsgenie alert so we can continue to track along the way what's been going on, and then add any additional notes or updates to that specific incident in Opsgenie. And then as we're starting to communicate and execute all of these, we can go ahead and jump on a bridge similar to the one that we're on now, back in Opsgenie. So here, because Opsgenie has already provided a conference bridge for you out of the box, this will allow you to go ahead and immediately start to communicate with all of the different teams and individual users that are going to help you resolve this issue. And it's at this point that Opsgenie can start to tie in all of the different workflows and then notify your users additionally to provide updates through the different channels that we're working through. So here we can start to set our proper milestones, which we can send directly to Slack and then export into Jira Ops. We'll have our chat functionality available directly from here as well, where we can start to communicate and help with all of the issues. And then as I had mentioned, we'll always have our Slack channel. So as stakeholders are looking to provide updates and gain insight, instead of reaching out directly to the teams that are working on it and interrupting progress, they can come directly into Slack and then take the time to get caught up on what the actual issue is. And then it's at that point we can start to immediately handle the incident process more effectively and then collaborate more efficiently and have all of that information tied together. Now again, as I had mentioned, we're also working in updating our Jira integration for us as well, so we can start to provide the framework for any potential bugs or things that we need to tie to the ticket itself, so that way it's properly being tracked. And having all of that information handy here in Jira will help more efficiently, again, as we start to incorporate the Jira Service Desk ticket, the Confluence page, and build out the automation for that. So when the bug fix does happen, people understand why. Everything's already been documented for them. There's relevant customer information tied to it. And then everything can be contributed back here directly in Jira Ops for that communication once the issue's been resolved. And then effectively, as we go through Jira Ops and start to accept the issue that's been submitted to us, that information will be tracked and updated directly in Opsgenie, as well as our specific Slack channels. So all of that information will populate in here for us as well. And this is, again, just ensuring that everybody, through our customers, through status page, our internal stakeholders through Slack, and all of the engineers and people working on the issue have a single place to go to work on any of the issues that are popping up, and then have the ability to push that directly to Jira for proper documentation again. And then ultimately, again, as we start to work through and close down any of the relevant issues, once the issue's been resolved, because of all the integrations that we have, the issue in Opsgenie will be closed for us, as well as all of our documentation being updated. The incident will be resolved, and that information will be sent directly to our Slack channel. Our customers will immediately be updated through our status page. We can let them know once we're finished with our post-mortem. Again, internal stakeholders will be able to immediately identify, as well as anybody in a sales position, to update their customers and letting them know systems are back online and back to normal. And then the communication, again, happening through Opsgenie, the documentation being sent directly to our users, letting them know the issue has been resolved, and then the update directly into Jira for us as well. So as we start to go through and plan for future sprints, all of that has been documented without having to manually enter exactly what has gone on multiple times in multiple different tools. Now, while all of this is going on and all of the different systems are being updated, certainly, metrics are what drives an organization, especially from an incident response perspective. Within Opsgenie's reports, what we're able to provide, not just from a high level, but for each specific service, is metrics around the number of times an incident has occurred, what the uptime percentage is for that, and then the insight into the global services that we have built within our system itself. So here we can see our customer or user management service has been up about 99% over this 7-day period. Our ingestion rates have only been up 26% of the time. So here we can see immediately that we need to do a lot of work in these 3 services, which are tied to the multiple monitoring tools that we have in place. So understanding what's going on in the infrastructure, insight into the number of incidents that have occurred day over day, and then what our team's performance is from a user perspective as well as from a team perspective, to see what additional benchmarks and improvements we can make from documentation in Confluence and ultimately our workflows through all the other systems. And then once we drill specifically into our team, we can get better insight and focus in on our team's goals and have those rolled directly up into the organizational goals that are being rolled out there. So here my team just solely focuses on search. We've had 3 incidents over that time period with a time to respond within 20 hours, and then gaining the different visibility and insight into what's actually been going on. And then instead of having to either recreate or share this multiple times, Opsgenie does provide the ability to go ahead and schedule these reports, whether it be a user of the platform, a non-user of the platform, or some type of mechanism where we're going to actually populate this directly into the Confluence page for you. You can define that here, set the time period in which we should deliver that, and then ultimately have the configuration built out so that documentation is being provided for you immediately at that point. And then again, our individual metrics on the incidents, those will also be available for us in our incident section, which will provide us the visibility on the number of people that joined our conference bridge, all of the actions that took place, what the time to respond and time to resolve was for this particular incident, and then any of the other users, again, that were notified and brought in to help resolve that issue and get systems back online. So from a high level, I wanted to kind of take that time based off of the acquisition and everything that's been going on here at Opsgenie to really show our customers and current people that we're working with, if you're leveraging Atlassian products, or if you're leveraging Atlassian products now and thinking of a tool like Opsgenie, what Opsgenie would be able to provide for you out of the box, which is going to be, again, that automation, the communication between your users, your systems, and then hopefully putting in a more efficient process to resolve time to acknowledge, time to respond, which will ultimately keep systems up longer, reduce loss of revenue, and any other potential impact to business.
Great, and we do have a bunch of questions that did come in while you were going through that, so
Sure.
I want to take a couple of those.
Yeah.
I think this is a good one right after what you were just talking about from John. Just talking about best practice, Opsgenie generates Jira tickets or vice versa. I realize both are possible, but is there a best practice? You're talking about Opsgenie working with Jira.
Yep. So I would recommend anything from a manual or business side. If your users are going to be reaching out to a support desk, I would recommend having those alerts be sent to Opsgenie that way. And then the automated piece where we're going to be creating issues in Jira, really think of that as the ability to start the documentation process on potential systems that either had downtime or there was a push or update release that went out that was bad, where we're automatically going to not only notify you about that, but again, start the documentation process. That's how a lot of our customers are leveraging it, is those high critical, high severity alerts that do need documentation and follow-up. That's where a lot of our customers leverage that component of it. And then the manual piece that we've talked about at the beginning, that's just a more effective way to put a process around, okay, if anybody in leadership submits a ticket, we need to have a more aggressive SLA over, again, somebody that's just submitting forgot password or invalid login credential type issue.
And talking about Jira Service Desk. So when a Jira Service Desk ticket is made and an incident is created in Opsgenie, does that incident ticket link to the Jira Service Desk ticket?
Yes. What it will do is it'll create a master ticket within Opsgenie, similar to, I think, master cases within Jira Service Desk. And then it'll tie all of the subcases and what we would call associated alerts in Opsgenie together. So that way, as actions are taken on the different ones, they're updating the appropriate cases and then making sure the synchronization is seamless between the two. And the way we're able to do that, if there's any question, we leverage what we call an alias within all of our integrations. It's basically allowing us to deduplicate and correlate those alerts, which is how we'll be able to identify and know which ones we should be updating and with what information.
Okay, great. And what options are there for the SOC agent to initiate creating a Jira ticket from an Opsgenie alert, i.e. not fully automated?
Sure. So what some of our SOC teams do that don't have a fully automated system is they'll go ahead and they'll submit the ticket, and then they can leverage Opsgenie to usher that ticket along. So if they've submitted a ticket and they know within their system that they're almost close to breaching SLA or whatever it might be, you can take the action to just kind of move that ticket along by escalating to the next step in your process, or you can start to add in additional teams or individual recipients. So this is useful if you do have any SMEs on call, or some of our customers will use this to immediately notify and grab their manager if needed, and then start the process that way. Because as they start to do this, again, it's going to be tracked and updated directly in your system itself. So if we go ahead and add me to this one, we can see here that that's already been documented for us. We've gone through, updated the system that was needed, and then at that point it was taken care of for us. That's how some of our customers will do it from a SOC perspective, to ensure that they're not having to look up phone numbers, find who's available, who's on call. That can be managed directly in Opsgenie to help with that process, or even with the Slack integration. A lot of our customers leverage this to quickly glance at who's on call and then submit the tickets to those users. So that way, if your SOC team wants to just work directly out of a chat tool, they can manage it that way as well, and then always have that information available to disperse those tickets as well.
Cool. And there's a question we were talking about, the reporting, downtime report, downtime by service report. What if the incidents weren't service affecting, such as informational warning alerts, how will Opsgenie know not to count those low priority alerts as service affecting?
Yep. So what you're able to do in your Teams page, I didn't cover this intentionally because I figured that type of question would come up.
Mm-hmm.
What you're able to do, and the way we approach it within your team, you're going to go ahead and define services. Services are really anything that you can think of internally that are of value to you that you always need to be aware of if there's downtime, like a shopping cart or payment system, things like that that are going to provide revenue and ultimately make your product successful for your customers. So the way we're able to identify which ones should have the ability to define and create those incidents is going to be here in this filter section. It's the same exact filter section that's available in the any other portion of the setup within Opsgenie, whether it be the routing rules, the policies, the integrations themselves. This is where you can start to define those different types of cases. So if we want to leverage this information here, but also say anything that's coming directly from Jira Service Desk, then only those types of alerts would then create the incident. And then here we can start to build out and define again what conference bridge information will be available, information we're going to translate and relay to our stakeholders, and then build out multiple dependencies for the different services that you have internally.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, this is a popular question, talking about just Jira Cloud and Server. So is the Jira integration only for cloud? Is there support for server or Jira Data Center?
Yep. Yeah, so it's going to be the same exact functionality for both. It doesn't matter to us if it's in the cloud or if it's on-premise. If it's in the cloud, it's just a simple adding of a webhook. If it's on-premise, then what we do is we leverage our integration server, and then that way we can securely make outbound connections to execute those actions for you. There's a nice video that Sean and his team have actually put together on Opsgenie. It's under Opsgenie Merid. So we go to Opsgenie Merid Docs. There's a quick video here as to what this utility is and how it works for you. So it'll help with that automation and that workflow for the on-premise solutions, as well as any of your open source tools like Nagios or Zabbix, Prometheus, any of those on-premise solutions that you're looking to kind of get that functionality out of. That's where we're starting to see a lot of kind of value for the Atlassian customers running data center is the ability to add now that workflow and automation pretty seamlessly.
Cool. So we'll do a couple more here. We'll be cognizant of everybody's time. But thanks for asking all the questions. And if we don't get to your question on the call, we'll definitely follow up offline as well. Can you guys talk a little bit about incoming call integration and call routing and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the integrations page, we have a functionality if anybody that's running a service desk and leveraging a ticketing tool, and you have an incoming call support line that your customers or internal users are reaching out to. Opsgenie provides an incoming call integration with a pre-provided number for you. So as your either customers or internal folks are calling this number, Opsgenie will give you the ability, again, to go and create an auto attendant for routing to specific teams, and then defining different escalations, and then giving you the ability that when that call comes through, an alert gets created, a user on call gets notified based off of the workflow that we would define here. But again, during that time, your user doesn't have to go to their ticketing tool and open up a ticket. All they need to do is go into Opsgenie and then have that ticket that's already been provided for them, and then click directly in there, and the case has already been created. So this is similar to any of the other integrations that we provide and kind of the flexibility, but really it's just kind of giving you an additional option to look at for your incoming call support lines that you provide to your customers.
Great. Okay, good. So that's a good number of questions. So let me take control back here, and we'll wrap things up for today. Yep. All right. Okay. So next steps. So one thing we want to make sure everyone is aware about is with Opsgenie's got, now that we're a part of the Atlassian family, we've got some new pricing and packaging on the website. So Definitely encourage you, if you're not already using Opsgenie, if you're on the Atlassian side, to try it. Up to 5 users, you can get going for free. You can go to opsgenie.com at any time. Also, we talked a little bit about Jira Ops. So Jira Ops is in an early access environment right now. You can go to atlassian.com/ops if you want to play around with that tool and start testing it out as well and give feedback. The Jira Ops team is also doing a webinar, a more in-depth dive on Jira Ops and how it integrates with Opsgenie and other tools as well, December 5th. So that link in the webinar there on the slide will take you to the registration page. So that's a good one to attend as well. And I think the last thing we want to do is just throw a quick poll on the screen just to see, based on what you've heard today, I'd love to get some feedback for anyone out there who wants to get integrated further with the tools that we've been talking about. If you could vote on the screen, that'd be super helpful, and we can kind of customize our follow-up with you for anyone who does want to dive in further. All right, so there's a bunch of people out there, so that's great. All right, so I'll close that down. Thanks for that. We've gone over a bunch of questions today. I think that's pretty good for now. We'll wrap things up for today, but thank you very much for joining the webinar, and we'll see you next time, and we will get back to you within 24 hours with the recording of the webinar and the slide deck. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.